1963, the year speed stopped following rules and started making history.
Among the muscle cars that once shook America's drag strips, there were a few that terrified even the rule makers themselves. Machines so fierce, so unpredictable, that the NHRA had no choice but to shut them down. They weren't just fast, they were defiant, born from secret blueprints and fearless ambition. Each one carried the soul of rebellion, roaring against limits that no one dared to challenge. This is the story of 5 legends. The NHRA tried to erase cars that burned too bright to be controlled. From the hidden mystery motor Corvette to the unholy Hemi Dart, these weren't races, they were revolutions on wheels. They didn't break the rules, they forced the NHRA to write new ones. The 1960s roared with competition. Ford, Chevy and Dodge locked in a horsepower war. Every new engine was bolder, every pass faster. The NHRA tried to keep order, but Detroit's factories were building monsters that no rulebook could tame. Number 1, 1963, Chevrolet Corvette Z06, Mystery Motor. It started, as most legends do, with a secret hidden behind factory doors. In early 1963, Chevrolet's engineers quietly created something that shouldn't have existed, a Corvette that could humiliate everything on the strip. They called it the Z06, but buried under its fiberglass skin was something even wilder, an experimental 427 cubic inch mystery motor that would terrify the NHRA before it ever took the Christmas tree lights. This wasn't a production car, it was a loophole on wheels built to look legal, but designed to destroy. Officially, Chevrolet said the engine was a 409, but racers knew better. The so-called mystery motor was part of a secret project meant for the upcoming Daytona 500, featuring an advanced big block design, canted valves, and power figures far beyond anything the NHRA had ever sanctioned for stock competition. When the first Z06s arrived at the strip, they looked unassuming, clean, sleek, and every bit the gentleman's sports car. But when they fired up, the ground told a different story. The roar of that 427 was sharper, angrier, and impossibly fast off the line. Within days, whispers spread across the pits, Chevy's hiding something. And they were right. Racers who got their hands on the car, men like Mickey Thompson and Smokey Yunick, began rewriting the timesheets. The mystery motor wasn't just fast, it was untouchable. Cars running the NHRA's superstock and factory experimental classes suddenly looked outdated. The Corvette stormed down the quarter-mile with such fury that competitors accused Chevrolet of cheating. But technically, the engine didn't violate any written rule, it just exceeded everything anyone thought possible. The NHRA, however, wasn't impressed. To them, the Z06 represented a dangerous precedent. If Chevrolet was willing to build secret engines, how long before Ford and Chrysler followed suit? The sport was already teetering between innovation and chaos, and the mystery motor was the spark that could burn it all down. The NHRA launched investigations, inspecting engines, measuring bore and stroke dimensions, and demanding full documentation from Chevrolet engineers. When the truth came out that this wasn't a 409, but a prototype 427, designed purely to dominate, NHRA officials acted fast. They reclassified the Corvette, banned the mystery motor from further competition, and forced Chevrolet to end its experimental involvement in NHRA-sanctioned drag racing. In one move, they shut down the most advanced factory program of its time. Chevrolet, frustrated but strategic, quietly retreated. Officially, they claimed the project had served its purpose. Unofficially, they were furious that the NHRA had killed what could have been the most dominant drag machine of the decade. The mystery motor program was buried before it could fully bloom. But the legend refused to die. The few cars that survived became myths in motion, symbols of a time when factory engineers played cat and mouse with the NHRA, dancing on the edge of legality. The 1963 Corvette Z06 mystery motor didn't just challenge the rulebook, it forced the NHRA to rewrite it, sealing its place as the first great outlaw in drag racing history. And as Chevrolet packed up its tools, the message was clear. Innovation had crossed the line, and the NHRA was just getting started, tightening the leash. Number 2, 1964 Ford Thunderbolt, the factory freak that broke the system. If the Corvette's mystery motor had rattled the NHRA's foundations, the 1964 Ford Thunderbolt nearly shattered them. It wasn't born in a design studio. It was forged in the fires of Detroit's muscle war. Ford was tired of watching Chevrolet and Chrysler steal the spotlight, and they decided to fight back with something so radical that even their own engineers called it insane. The goal was simple: build a drag strip weapon straight from the factory, capable of humiliating anything on four wheels. Ford engineers took the modest Fairlane body, a mid-sized grocery getter, and stuffed under its hood a monster 427 cubic inch V8, pulled directly from their NASCAR program. It was a power plant, never meant for daily driving. Raw, violent, and bursting with torque, it turned the Thunderbolt into a missile in disguise. To make it faster, Ford stripped it bare. The Thunderbolt had no heater, no radio, and almost no creature comforts. The front fenders and hood were fiberglass. Windows were thin, plexiglass. The battery was shoved into the trunk for traction. It was a factory car only by name. Everything about it screamed purpose-built racer. Out of roughly 100 Thunderbolts produced, each was hand-assembled like a race car, tested and tuned for one thing: total domination. When the first Thunderbolts appeared on NHRA tracks, the reaction was electric. The car was brutally quick, clocking quarter-mile times in the mid-11s straight out of the box, with skilled drivers dipping into the 10s. It crushed every class it entered, leaving the NHRA scrambling. Rivals like Dodge and Chevrolet didn't stand a chance. The Ford's 427 high-riser engine inhaled air through massive intake ports, its dual four-barrel carburetors feeding a beast that made well over 500 horsepower, numbers the NHRA could no longer ignore. But victory came at a cost. NHRA inspectors soon realized that the Thunderbolt wasn't a production car in any meaningful sense. Dealers couldn't sell it to average buyers, and Ford had built just enough units to technically qualify for superstock class entry. To many officials, it was a betrayal of the spirit of competition. The Thunderbolt was so dominant that some races became predictable before they began. The association had to act, or risk losing credibility altogether. By late 1964, the NHRA stepped in. They redefined stock eligibility, mandating minimum production numbers and limiting the use of lightweight materials. The Thunderbolt, once a legal contender, suddenly found itself too extreme for the very class it was built to conquer. It wasn't officially banned outright, but it was boxed out. The new rules made sure no car like it would ever exist again. For Ford's engineers, it was a bittersweet ending. They had achieved mechanical perfection, but in doing so, they'd exposed the limits of the NHRA's tolerance for innovation. The Thunderbolt had been too good, too fast, too unstoppable, and that was its undoing. Still, the legend never faded. Every time a modern Ford roars down the quarter-mile, echoes of the Thunderbolt's fury can still be heard. It proved that when you mix fearless engineering with factory muscle, you get something the NHRA can't control, only contain. Number 3. 1968. Dodge Hemi Dart, LO23, the factory outlaw. By 1968, the muscle car wars had become a full-blown arms race. Chevrolet, Ford, and Chrysler were all playing with fire, but only one dared to burn the rulebook itself. That rebel was Dodge, and its weapon was the Hemi Dart LO23, a car so wild, so stripped, so violently fast that even the NHRA couldn't decide whether to allow it or run from it. Unlike the Thunderbolt, which still wore the shell of a street car, the Hemi Dart was born with no such disguise. Dodge didn't pretend this was something you could buy, drive home, and park in your garage. This machine had one purpose: to destroy the quarter-mile. The idea came from deep inside Chrysler's race development program, where engineers asked a simple, dangerous question: what happens when you put the biggest engine we have into the smallest car we make? The answer arrived in the form of the A-body Dodge Dart, hand-built at Hurst Performance in Michigan. Each car was torn apart and rebuilt for speed. Acid-dipped panels, fiberglass fenders, aluminum doors, thin Lexan windows, and not an ounce of luxury. No carpet, no sound deadening, no back seats, just raw power and the smell of high-octane fuel. Under its lightweight shell lived the monstrous 426 cubic inch race Hemi, an engine that had already conquered NASCAR and Top Fuel. With dual four-barrel carburetors, forged internals, and compression ratios that defied logic, it produced well over 500 horsepower in a car that barely weighed 3,000 pounds. On the track, the Hemi Dart could rocket from 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds and tear through the quarter-mile in the low 10s, sometimes even the high 9s with a skilled driver. When it first appeared at NHRA-sanctioned events, the reaction was immediate and chaotic. Fans went wild. Competitors groaned. Officials panicked. The Hemi Dart didn't just win, it obliterated. Cars in the same superstock class didn't stand a chance, and it became clear that Dodge had crossed a line between production and prototype. NHRA inspectors tore the cars apart, trying to find violations, but technically Dodge had followed the written rules. It had simply exploited them better than anyone else. The Dart was factory-built, but not for public roads. It was a legal ghost, existing in the gray zone between compliance and defiance. As the season went on, the NHRA's patience wore thin. They reclassified the car, changed eligibility criteria, and eventually ruled that cars like the LO23 Dart no longer met superstock requirements. It was the organization's way of saying, "This machine is too fast to be fair." The Hemi Dart was quietly forced out, its dominance locked away behind new regulations. But the ban only made it stronger. Freed from NHRA oversight, the Dart became an outlaw hero, racing in unsanctioned events, match races, and small-town strips where no one cared about rulebooks. Racers and fans revered it as the ultimate symbol of rebellion, the car that was too powerful for the NHRA. Even decades later, the LO23 remains a legend, whispered among drag racing purists. It proved that when engineers chase perfection without permission, they create history that can't be contained by committees or rule changes. The NHRA may have erased it from competition, but it lives on in every outlaw racer who still believes that rules are meant to be broken. The Dodge Hemi Dart wasn't banned because it cheated, it was banned because it was too perfect for control. Number 4. 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda Superstock, the rulebook's breaking point. By 1970, Detroit's muscle machine madness had reached its boiling point. The NHRA had already seen what happened when Dodge unleashed the Hemi Dart. But Plymouth wasn't done yet. They wanted their turn to bend the rules, to prove that Chrysler still owned the strip. Their weapon, the 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda Superstock, a machine so ferocious that it forced the NHRA to question what the word stock even meant. On the surface, the Hemi Cuda looked like something you could drive to the grocery store: bright paint, bold stripes, and the signature shaker hood. But under that shimmering shell was pure drag strip DNA. This wasn't a regular Cuda, it was a factory-built storm, designed to dominate superstock. Chrysler engineers took everything they learned from the outlawed Hemi Dart and sharpened it to perfection. They started by stripping weight wherever they could. Lightweight panels, thinner glass, minimal insulation, and a gutted interior, all standard fare for Plymouth's factory race program. Under the hood, the now infamous 426 cubic inch Hemi returned with vengeance. Aluminum heads, high lift cams, massive dual carburetors, and a torque curve that could twist metal. On launch, the car didn't just move, it leapt, carrying its front wheels high into the air before slamming back down and charging through the quarter-mile like a bullet. Times in the mid-10s were routine. Skilled drivers pushed even lower. The Cuda became an instant terror, outpacing everything in its path. And once again, the NHRA found itself on the edge of panic. This was supposed to be a class for stock cars machines that ordinary people could theoretically buy, modify slightly, and race. But there was nothing ordinary about this superstock Cuda. You couldn't buy it off a showroom floor. You couldn't drive it to work. You couldn't even keep it idling for long without overheating. It was a full-blown race car with a license plate. The NHRA's rulebook began to crumble under the weight of its own contradictions. Fans loved the spectacle, the thunder, the wheel stands, the violence of acceleration. But competitors complained that the car was unbeatable. Inspectors started to crack down, introducing new limits on weight to cubic inch ratios, engine configurations, and allowable modifications. Every page of the NHRA's handbook seemed to be rewritten because of the Cuda. But despite the restrictions, the legend of the Hemi Cuda only grew. Drivers like Dick Landy and Don Grother piloted these beasts with unmatched skill, their names forever linked to the car's dominance. The sight of a superstock Hemi Cuda lifting off the line became one of drag racing's most iconic images, a moment frozen in time, symbolizing both glory and rebellion. By the end of 1970, the NHRA had effectively closed the chapter on the factory superstock era. No more ultra-lightweight builds, no more small-run specials, and certainly no more near dragsters wearing production badges. The Cuda had been too much, too fast, too uncontainable. But in that brief, blinding moment of perfection, Plymouth had created something unforgettable, a car that marked both the pinnacle and the downfall of factory drag racing. The NHRA tried to cage it, but the roar of the Hemi still echoed in every corner of the track. The 1970 Hemi Dart wasn't just the rulebook's breaking point, it was the moment the NHRA realized it could never truly control the power it helped inspire. Number 5. 1969 Chevrolet Camaro ZL1, the aluminum anomaly. By 1969, Detroit's muscle war was nearing its most dangerous peak. The NHRA had just reined in Dodge and Plymouth, but Chevrolet wasn't backing down. They had one last ace hidden up their sleeve, a weapon that would once again blur the line between road car and race car. It came disguised as a humble Camaro, but beneath its steel skin lived something that defied reason, an all-aluminum 427 cubic inch engine known as the ZL1. This was not just another power plant, it was a technological marvel born in Chevrolet's racing division, originally developed for the Can-Am series, where limits didn't exist. Engineers knew it was too wild for street use, but they also knew the NHRA's rulebook demanded a certain number of production cars for superstock classification. So in true outlaw fashion, Chevrolet built just enough to qualify 69 units in total and quietly slipped them into dealerships. Each one was a time bomb waiting to go off on the drag strip. Under the hood, the ZL1's aluminum block and heads made it nearly 100 pounds lighter than its iron counterpart, the L88. Its factory rating claimed 430 horsepower, but real-world dyno tests told a different story, well over 500, sometimes even 500. Paired with a close-ratio Muncie 4-speed or a heavy-duty turbo 400 automatic, it was an NHRA nightmare disguised as a Camaro. When the ZL1 hit the tracks, disbelief followed. Cars that looked street-legal were suddenly running times that rivaled full-blown dragsters. The aluminium engine allowed for near-perfect weight distribution, and when that power hooked, it launched like a slingshot. Racers like Dick Harrell, Bill Jenkins, and others used the ZL1 to crush the competition, forcing the NHRA to take immediate notice. But the NHRA's tolerance for factory manipulation had already worn thin. They had been burned before by the Hemi Dart, the Thunderbolt, and the Cuda, and they weren't about to let Chevrolet rewrite the game again. Officials began scrutinizing the ZL1 program, noting that it wasn't a true production car but rather a special build. The car's price, over $7,000 in 1969, ensured that almost no ordinary buyer could ever afford it, further proving that this wasn't a muscle car for the masses. Still, Chevrolet's move had already done its damage. The NHRA introduced stricter weight-to-cubic-inch ratio rules that effectively killed the ZL1's advantage. The aluminum big block was seen as too exotic, too unfair, and too expensive to fit within the sport's intended spirit. Within a year, the NHRA reclassified the car and closed the door on any future like it. Yet, even in defeat, the ZL1's legend grew. It represented the final evolution of an era, the point where engineering genius and corporate audacity collided head-on with bureaucracy. The NHRA may have ended its run, but it couldn't erase the car's impact. Every ZL1 built became a piece of forbidden art, part dragster, part dream, and all rebellion. Today, those 69 Camaros stand as silent reminders of a time when the only thing more powerful than the engines was the courage to build them. The ZL1 didn't just challenge the NHRA, it exposed their greatest fear, that the factories could build something so perfect, so advanced, that no rule could ever contain it, when innovation became the enemy. By the early 70s, Detroit's brilliance had turned into the NHRA's nightmare. Every new idea, lighter bodies, bigger engines, secret builds, was met with suspicion. Innovation was no longer celebrated, it was contained. The rulebook didn't protect competition anymore, it protected control. The NHRA's crackdown, the NHRA struck back hard. New rules demanded higher production numbers, heavier cars, and smaller engines. The wild machines of yesterday were pushed out, replaced by tamer versions that fit neatly within limits. The age of fearless innovation was over. Order had won, but excitement had vanished. Aftermath, the end of the wild era. By the mid-1970s, the drag strips grew quieter. The once glorious factory wars were gone, buried under emissions laws and NHRA restrictions. The muscle era's roar faded into memory, but the legends it produced, the banned beasts of Detroit, would echo forever in racing history. How the banned cars became legends. What the NHRA tried to erase only became myth. The banned machines turned into cult icons, rebels frozen in chrome and thunder. Collectors restored them, racers worshipped them, and fans remembered them as proof that greatness often lives where rules are broken. The NHRA may have silenced them, but their roar still echoes through history. These banned legends proved that true power can't be contained by rules. If stories of fearless machines ignite your passion, subscribe to Regal Rides, where the wildest cars still live and roar again.